It's Friday, the 22nd of April, 2022. Welcome to the Fast Five by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, 5 stories to get through in 5 minutes. Let's jump into it. The first story this morning is a cracker. It's all about the local share market. It traded above 7,600 points yesterday for the first time since August last year. That's just a touch now below its all-time high.
Yes, the S&P ASX 200 hit 7,605 points before falling back below 7,600 in the last couple of minutes of trading. It's now just 41 points below its all-time high of 8 months ago. That's about 0.5%, not much at all. The S&P ASX 200 has been a really strong performer this year compared to global markets. Wall Street's down about 7%. European markets are off 6%. Japan's off 6%. Hong Kong's off 12%. The only other outperformer is the FTSE in London. The reason? Both the ASX and the FTSE contain commodity prices. Higher commodity prices feed through to higher share prices. Many industrials and miners have done really well as a result. Think of the locals. BHP is up 20% this year. Rio Tinto 17%. Fortescue 8%. The oil and gas companies, wow, they've done well. Woodside's up 45% this year. Santos up 27%. Gold Digger Newcrest up 17%. I can keep going. I'll give you one more. Diversified Miner South 32. It's up 26%. These are all top 30 companies on the ASX. So the ASX has been a great place to invest so far this year.
All right, on to story number 2, Sean, and it's always going to be an election update. And look, they've been pretty run-of-the-mill so far. The election campaign's been pretty standard up until last night when opposition leader Anthony Albanese tested positive for COVID, throwing the entire Labor campaign into disarray.
It did after a pretty solid performance in his debate with Prime Minister Scott Morrison on Wednesday night, which really got his campaign back on track after some early stumbles. Albanese and Labor didn't need this. He tested positive after a routine check and now has to do the campaign virtually for the next 7 days. The fallout from the debate on Sky on Wednesday continued yesterday. It was harder on the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, than Albanese. Morrison, who spent yesterday in Queensland, was forced to apologise for his statement that he was blessed to have children without disabilities. Australian of the Year Dylan Alcott, a wheelchair athlete, took issue with the comment. The Prime Minister also faced questioning about when he knew of the China-Solomon Islands Security Pact. He's very much under fire for that one. Albanese, ahead of his positive COVID test, spent much of his day in New South Wales. He's been critical of the government on the Solomon Islands, though he did say that Beijing will be a problem regardless of which party wins government.
All right, on to story number 3, Sean. And it's not very often that we get to talk about protests near Chilean mines, but when it involves the biggest company on the Australian Stock Exchange, BHP, it gets a mention.
It does. Now, its share price fell nearly 3% yesterday after lowering its forecast for copper and nickel production. As you mentioned, its Escondida mine in Chile, which mines copper, in fact, one of the world's biggest copper mines, has had all sorts of problems because of protests around the mine. It's easy to forget that the big Australian does much more than mine iron ore. At the moment, iron ore is its biggest revenue earner, but it's also a global player in copper, nickel, coal, oil and gas, at least for the moment, and even potash. Anyway, it's had all sorts of workforce issues related to COVID-19 and workforce shortages and, of course, the social unrest. Anyway, BHP's share price, as I mentioned, down 3% yesterday.
All right, story number 4, Sean. You tend to get excited about some pretty strange things sometimes. Usually it's about economics or kind of obscure elements of the business world.
We are a business podcast, just pointing that out, but go on.
But do you get abnormally excited about strange things, right? Mm-hmm. And this is one of them. You get really excited about pallets, which is, the wooden pallets that people use to transport stuff around the world. And apparently there's a shortage of them. Take it away.
Yes. The world's biggest supplier of pallets is ASX-listed Brambles, and there's plenty going on in the pallet world. There are supply chain pressures due to the war in Ukraine. Timber prices are high. In fact, the price of timber for pallets is now at a record high. Demand is strong as global economies pick up speed and retailers boost their inventory levels, worried about supply chain disruptions. At the same time, people aren't giving pallets back, well, not as much as normal. Brambles operates around 345 million pallets crates and containers across 60 countries. Yesterday, it said it was pushing through price increases to customers, upping its full-year revenue guidance. Imagine making hundreds of $1 million out of pallets. Things aren't too bad for Brambles. Its share price jumped 8% yesterday after the upgrade.
All right, story number 5, Sean, and this is probably a bit of a worrying story for many of us. I'm including myself in that category, but Endeavour Group, which owns liquor outlets and a bunch of pubs, is going to put up the price of a pub meal.
Yes, the counter lunch or steak at the pub or whatever you like is now going to cost more. Endeavour runs 344 hotels as well as Dan Murphy's and BWS. As a result of much higher red meat costs, prices are going up. Now, it hasn't deterred patrons yet. People are pretty excited to be out and about again after restrictions have been lifted. Endeavour's hotel division, in fact, made revenue of more than $400 million in the first 3 months of the year. That's up nearly 4%. In contrast, the liquor stores that did really well during COVID fell back a bit. Bottom line, pub lunches are going to cost more.
All right, that's it. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 22nd of April, 2022. Remember to hit follow on the podcast, and if 5 minutes isn't enough for you, then you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed on your podcast platform. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.